I'm happy.
Go Abby. Work under pressure.
I'm going to fade out now.
And now we're live.
Perfect.
Thank you and good evening. Apologies for the delay due to technical difficulties. I will now call the December 7th, 2023 special open executive work session of the MRH Board of Education to order at 6:37 p.m. Can I get a motion and a second to approve the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 2.01, Board Professional Development regarding the LGBTQIA curricular integration with Dr. McGee.
Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you. We are kicking up our conversation here tonight, and this is meant to be a dialogue. So we're going to put together some prompts, go through a couple slides, and then cede the floor to open conversation and dialogue around this topic. So excited to be here and to share and to get us moving along. The first thing I wanted to bring our attention to is the Edutopia article that was shared in board docs today, centering on incorporating LGBTQIA content in history lessons. And we all know that doesn't just have to be history lessons, but at least this will get us started in conversation. What were some of the things that either surprised you, interested you, or were your takeaways from this initial article to get you going today?
Chris, I'll start. What I liked about this particular article is that it created kind of like a scaffold in regards to how we integrate topics and information for lessons in the classroom regarding LGBTQIA. More specifically, if I can get my computer to work. The part where, a second. The tiered approach, more specifically, so it talks about looking at it from the contribution aspect, additive, and then transformative, and then going into like social action and what that actually could be for schools and also in the classroom from a civic perspective. So that was the piece that I liked because it was easy for me to see how this could actually fit within our individual schools based on the level. So for example, if I'm thinking about a pre-K2 building, you may be looking at more of the contribution standpoint and a little bit of the additive, but not necessarily the social action piece. So that was kind of my takeaway from the article.
I appreciated the section on the depoliticization of the conversation and how deftly that was handled, particularly the concepts that representation of LGBTQIA individuals in the curriculum is not an examination of sexuality or an endorsement of a social or political agenda. And I think that's an important clarification for us to meditate on as we're thinking about curricular integration. This is really about human rights and inclusion and not about politics.
Yeah, often. Go ahead, Josh.
I'm just curious as to how you foresee this as sort of organically integrating into the curriculum so that you don't just, so it just doesn't look like canned, like, okay, now's the time we talk about, LGBTQ plus or IA plus stuff, as if it's like obligatory, check a box kind of thing rather than sort of, I mean, I don't understand, like months devoted to certain things. Like in my opinion, like Black History Month should be Black History every day kind of thing. Like it shouldn't just be, we're only going to talk about it for this period of time. It should be throughout the curriculum, pointing out examples of all kinds of different people, like all kinds of diversity, all kinds of different history and how it all works together.
And for me, I think the article touched on some great points as far as conversation starting and adding it to a curriculum. My only concern is what is the dialogue and how, as a school district, will it be presented to parents, stakeholders, students, and how involved will their voices be as you're preparing for the curriculum?
Beautiful. Thank you all for participating in that and getting us going and thinking through just grounding in a little bit of the work. And we're going to jump into some overview, potentially answering some of those questions, and then giving you an opportunity to kind of bat some ideas and concepts around. So we're going to talk about curricular integration, and we're going to look at, first of all, what is curriculum? We did a little bit of that last year, and we're going to just add on to that. And then specifically look at our LGBTQIA resolution, and not the entire resolution, but the things specifically focused on learning and teaching. So that way we can identify how some of those things are just in its first year of implementation into our school district, and how we're working to make some of these things a reality for our kids and our community. So first question is to think about what is curriculum and what is it based on? So let's talk a little bit about that. So we have a board policy, IF, that really starts framing around what exactly is curriculum. It will align externally to all Missouri learning standards and the English learning development standards, and internally among grade levels and courses. So that's what kind of the big key things that our policy says our curriculum must be. So to the group, here's the question. What does it mean for curriculum to be based on the Missouri learning standards? Let's start there so that we can understand this, and then we'll jump off into further investigation. What does it mean for curriculum to be based on the Missouri learning standards?
Well, forgive me, Chris.
No,
First,
you're not
I
supposed to be a
was-
curricular expert.
Now, I was going to say, first, what I'd want to do is I'd want to see the example of what the Missouri learning standards are.
Well done. Well done. Yeah. So what we know is we can go to DESE's website. We can put in a content area and potentially a course, and it will outline specific things that we want students to know, understand, and be able to do. That can be sort of not only horizontally by different courses, but vertically as those courses map out between pre-kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. All right, so that's sort of the meat and potatoes of this. Now, see if you know any of this information. When was the last time we made some real big change to these standards? When do you think? This is not like trivia. You're not going to get any bonus points for it. Just like, let's throw out some concepts around here. When do we think we made some big changes in standards?
This would be Missouri as a state making big standards.
Correct.
It changes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Don't Google it.
25 years ago.
We
Right?
wish,
Yeah,
right?
Exactly right. Yeah.
How about like every year for the past like 6 years or so?
There have been continual upgrades, and we get new information. And one of the things that we try to do is stay abreast of all those different updates. Our last biggest refresh was during the pandemic, right around September 2020, potentially leading into early stages of 2021. There was a need for us to accelerate learning, all right? To really find, like, there's 1,000 standards. What are the most essential? And the state went through a series of different opportunities to refine and look at priority standards in a lot of our core academic areas like math, science, English language arts, and social studies. So that was sort of the biggest thing, is that not only were, we still have iterations of things improving, but we also had this focusing, this narrowing of the things that are out there in order for us to refine the opportunities that our kids have to accelerate that learning. So what does it mean for our curriculum to be based on the Missouri learning standards? It means that the items that we teach in our school and in our classroom are in some way, shape, or form aligned to what the state has put out. It's somewhere within the box, if you will, of those things. Okay, good. All right, now let's take a look on some of our policies related to curriculum so that way we can kind of understand where this all comes in. We have a policy, as you know, called academic freedom. This policy IB allows us to use resources that our professional wisdom, guidance, experience, we feel deem are the most appropriate to reach the standards set forth by the state. Okay, so these standards are expressed via goals and objectives of the adopted curriculum, and of course by board policy, school's vision, mission, and core value statements. In a classroom discussion or study, staff members are expected to adhere to the policy and, of course, assist students in learning how to think, not what to think. So those are the big key things that we're putting out there and we're putting forth in our policy IB around academic freedom. Our policy ACAE around transgender students looks at the approved course curriculum, and it may also be provided information about legal obligations to accommodate transgender and or non-binary persons. So where we see this often show up is not necessarily in English language arts, or we see this often in science or math. We often see this show up in potentially our health classroom. Okay, so these conversations show up when we start looking at our, puberty, if you will, like those conversations around 5th grade. And then we also start seeing conversations in middle school and 7th and 8th grade, where we start having conversations around the legal obligations accommodating transgender and or non-binary persons, and also providing that. Now, it says in the policy that it may be provided. So it's not necessarily saying that every kid's going to receive this content, but that it's an option and available to support our kids that may be identifying as transgender. Before launching a class of study, and here's policy INB, the teacher will discuss with the principal. So when these things start happening, our principals are notified. And that keys into communication that goes out to families. So that way our families are prepared for potential controversial topics. So that is our next question to you. So thinking about our ECC and our elementary school building, what topics might show up as controversial?
Well, from pre-K probably through 6, anything dealing with, well, I don't know about 6, but probably through 5th, like anything dealing with sex, anything dealing with, adult themes, kids are going to have questions or whatever, but I mean, that's not really, I don't see where pre-K through 5th it really needs to talk about it. I mean, not ignore it, but at the same time, like shouldn't be like an active lesson on,
Well said. You're right. And we're not going to see state standards aligned to that content. Where we see a little bit of a concern that we need to involve our parents is when we have a kid of advanced reading level. Because we are seeking to find resources to support their veracity in learning, and we want them to keep reading, oftentimes the content becomes also a little more mature, and we've got to have some one-on-one conversations. We've got to make sure our building principals looped into that so we can have those conversations with our adults. But you are exactly right, Josh, that these things don't often happen because it doesn't align with our content area. All right. Where we would see the things that we saw in the article is that we see opportunities around that level 1 of engaging. We're looking at contributions of the LGBTQ plus community. And that is something we see all the time in our schools. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Any other comments, thoughts in regards to PK6 and notifying of controversial topics?
Well, I think for me, and just kind of some of the conversations that we've had in community, and even Josh's question about things that organically show up, it is organic. For example, when students are having counseling lessons, or if a teacher is doing a read aloud, and maybe the characters in the book have a male and female characters being married, and maybe a child's family dynamics is not necessarily structured that way. And you may have a student to innocently ask a question. And then that's where those conversations begin to surface. But I guess, for me, I wouldn't find that to be a controversial topic. I think others outside of our community, might. But I think that's where you would see it in the depths of the lesson, where a very innocent question is asked, which then opens the door for further dialogue.
Well, I think that it depends on what the answer is. If the answer is like there's a million ways a family can look, not all families look the same, that's a different answer than, well, when a man loves a man and a woman loves a woman, sometimes they do this or that. I mean, you don't necessarily need to get into like detail. And I think that is what is going to alarm the community, is the idea that anything that might be considered, indoctrination or whatever buzzword, someone wants to use for it, and I guess what I am struggling with, or what I don't understand, is how to not ignore a very real portion of our population, but at the same time, like, you wouldn't necessarily talk about, normal, like, heterosexual relationships in a, more than a superficial level either at that age, I would think.
So to your point, Josh, that's exactly how teachers typically engage in that conversation. It's no different than, I'm thinking, when I read a book this summer at the Freedom School, and the books that were selected were around Juneteenth, and it was kind of centered around Black Lives Matter. And the student asked if their life mattered. And my answer really was crafted in such a way that I wasn't drilling down into something that could be more complex without the, family not having the information needed to be able to help and guide their child through that conversation. So I do think that our teachers do a very good job of not going into the weeds as we begin to talk about how to continue to engage and acknowledge that all families look different, but not necessarily going down the rabbit hole regarding what happens beyond that. I think is a good way to address that.
I have a quick question. Do we happen to know, like, a percentage roughly, I guess, of like what percentage of our students identify as LGBTQIA plus?
I can get that information. I do not have it right off. I look at, and I know this is probably, I look at students not necessarily as how many, but I know who they are and how they show up, but I can get that information.
Is that really something we want to keep track of, though?
I mean, we do if the students have changed their preferred names, but not necessarily. I do think statistically we should, because as we begin to look at survey data, not necessarily mapping kids, there is a reality that our students who are transgender or identify as other don't have the same sense of belonging in our spaces. So from that vantage point, I do want to be aware. But in regards to kind of tracking for the sake of, the answer to that would be no. So, Christy, that's a great question. I'm sure I can get that information aggregated for you, just to kind of give you an idea.
I guess, and I don't mean to keep like talking, but I mean, I do. I guess my concern here is, and I hope I'm not coming off wrong, it's just my concern is, like, I don't want to create, and I don't think we should create, a sense of otherness, like as if this is something abnormal, or or just something that sets them apart in any kind of negative way. And and that is my concern about the curriculum, is that it is not just like pointing at, hey, there's this portion of the population that only gets talked about every now and then and makes them seem like there's something, you know, inherently different about that. And I feel like it should all be normalized, if that makes sense.
And that's really the approach that we have. So just like we celebrate Black History Month, we celebrate LGBTQIA month, and we lift it up. And I agree with you. I don't necessarily think that it should be recognized just for 1 month, and it should be something that we do. But I will say that it's not where we're othering students, and it is very organic. And that was something that I shared during our community conversation. So it's not, and that was one of the questions that came up. And I was very clear, it's not this week. We're talking about gender bias or whatever the thing might be, but it's very organic. But I think in some minds, they believe that it is a segment of the curriculum that has been kind of carved out to specifically talk to it, but it's just organically coming through the conversations that occur in school.
Yeah, one of the things that I would like to point out here, I know this is in the context of our resolution in support of LGBTQIA students and staff, but as far as curriculum is concerned, this is a like universal sort of thing. And so I don't think with any of our curriculum, we single out individuals in classrooms around like, oh, well, you know, even things that like, oh, these kids are good at math, but these kids aren't good at math, you know, during a math lesson, right? So I'm with you, Josh, on the like, queer people exist in our world. It is important for those of us who are citizens of the world to understand that and to have empathy and understanding of a variety of people's experiences and contributions to our current society. And I also think it is oftentimes important for us to examine how the status quo is consistently reinforced in our community. I have heard from community members who have children who have divorced parents, right? Feeling excluded from the curriculum because of examples given in classrooms or things like that. And so I don't think this is only about, you know, our queer community members. This is really about a sensitivity to a variety of experiences and making sure that the examples that we use and the, you know, source material is inclusive of all the different ways that people contribute to our society.
I think I agree with you, Katie. I want to highlight that underrepresented populations need to be represented. And we need to remember that it could on some level look like singling out, but really what it is bringing it up. It's evening the scales so that there is visibility and care and knowledge and a sense of belonging.
Well said, all. Thank you for that. And recognizing that our curriculum is based on our state standards that we talked about, that we wouldn't, to our conversation, potentially push a content. We will invite a conversation and we ask questions in order to elicit our students to think, not for us to dictate where that goes. So let's shift the focus here. Think about our secondary building. Now that we're in more, adult-ish, older clientele, if you will, what might potentially be some of those topics that a teacher would say to a principal, and then a principal or that teacher would then be contacting home to make sure that families are aware? What might that look like and sound like?
So for
I-
me,
Wait, I think, I'm sorry, go on.
I wonder if this is an age range where students start to express personal beliefs around, the morality or just associations with maybe their families of origins, religion, things like that. So I could see conversations becoming a bit more personal based on the experiences of, what you've heard from authority figures in your life.
Yeah, think about the adolescent development cycle. Like for those of you that have had children that have gone through sort of the decoupling, if you will, from you being the parent that they snuggle up with at the end of the day, and they truly become their own individual human person. When that happens, they form opinions, fueled by the environment, fueled by the world around them, and we end up seeing that. And some of that comes out because if you look at those state standards, they'll talk about, we want kids researching, we want kids speaking, listening, defending, persuading. So when they're doing some of those things, they can't pick whether or not they like white bread or wheat bread. Like they're picking some really meaty topics that we as the adults have to make sure, hey, this kid picked this topic. I want you to know. I want to make sure that that's communicated to home, and we build the bridge that we're finding out more information and trying to seek to understand through that process. What else comes up for you?
I mean, just the propensity for kids to be kids, meaning jerks. And, so they would bullying or, inappropriate comments, having to pull someone aside, say, hey, we don't use these words, or we don't say, things, or, we don't behave in a certain way. And that, I think, because you probably would be having a conversation with a parent if those things occurred, and being ready for that kind of situation.
I think too, it kind of depends on just the makeup of the classroom potentially. Like for example, I know like with the bathroom, that obviously has been a huge deal with the community. And so even though it seems like a relatively minor thing, if that does come up in the classroom, that can potentially be a discussion that is a little bit controversial.
I would also say just the vocabulary, depending on the books that are selected. And because we have kept our books on the shelves, it is very likely, depending on what a teacher is using as an anchor text or as a book for book club or literacy circles or whatever they're doing in the classroom, some of the vocabulary and words that are being kind of emphasized in the book could be controversial as well. And so I'm sure we've probably read a bunch of those books when we were in high school too. So I think it's beyond like topics. I think it's also the vocabulary that's included in the text that kids would have access to.
Well, let me ask you, do they still teach Huck Finn in high school? The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, do they teach that in high school?
I don't want to say yes or no. Let me look into that.
Well, the reason I'm bringing it up is because that's got a lot of very controversial themes and words in it. And, if they're successfully teaching a text like that, I think you could mirror it for other types of curriculum.
Yeah, we've been really thinking about trying to get away from teaching a book. I know that's the school that I went to growing up, is that everybody reads the book together, and that does exist. Like we still have those, but we can analyze text features. We can analyze author's purpose and intent without all of us reading the same book. A lot of those strategies that we're looking at that we want kids to walk away with, we don't all have to read The Outsiders, even though awesome Pony Boy, to make all those things happen. So we can provide students the autonomy to choose the just right book for them.
Okay, well, I just want to say at this grade level, the youth pretty much start having their own freedom. So it's not like our youth are not seeing this in social media, talking with their friends about this topic. It's just that how do we bring it in a way to where, because we know their opinions are already formed, but how they can respect everyone, show compassion, because they're already seeing it. They, they follow certain celebrities, they're living a lifestyle and everything. It's just that how do we bring it when we're in the school, how to respect one another and have compassion and empathy and not have any ignorance towards someone because of your belief. Is that type of conversation are taught for them to respect others.
That's well said, Ms. Robinson. That is definitely an essential part of our second steps, social emotional learning scope and sequence. Like that is happening when we are getting kids to recognize and see each other and see each other for loving Minecraft, see each other for being cool with Legos, and see each other because we have two moms or two dads. Like just truly getting to know one another and honoring that is an essential part of who MRH is and is a part of our social emotional learning curriculum. Thank you for bringing that up. All right, I want to shift our focus and topic now into looking at items specifically in that LGBTQIA resolution related to learning and teaching. We're not going to hit every item, but we're going to highlight some things which are celebrations and progress that we've made, because this resolution is still in its infancy and we're all still working to implement the various pieces and parts of it. So I want to highlight some really great things that are happening around our district. So in October, we, in the resolution, celebrate LGBTQIA History Month. And with that, we categorize and collect some activities that our schools are doing to celebrate and provide access and potentially a spotlight to show students the contributions of many people and different family structures that are out there in the world around us. So what we see is that an email from me sort of kicks off the month, and that happens annually, that says, hey, this month, here's some curricular opportunities where we could engage at various schools and various levels and resources that are available. From that, we saw that the ECC really did a school-wide read aloud, if you will, of the Todd Parr book, The Family Book, which highlights every kind of family. It highlights adopted families, step families, one-parent families, families with two parents of the same sex, as well as your traditional nuclear family. So realizing that at that age, being able to see that family is a wide-ranging word with a lot of different definitions is a great way to really look at that level one that we saw in the article around acceptance and looking at what's out there. At the elementary school, with their morning broadcast, they made a significant opportunity for people to be highlighted that identify as LGBTQIA and have made a lasting impact in the world around us, which was kind of exciting to see how how kids got to hear new names and new voices and new opportunities about people that have made really great impacts in the world around us. And at our middle school and high school, our banned book week display and a bunch of our library programming that happened throughout the months. I've got this picture you see on your screen, and we'll show that identified opportunities for our LGBTQIA family to have representation in our schools. We also,
Dr. McGee?
Yes, sir.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but have y'all gotten feedback from our community, like our LGBT QIA community, that this is something that they appreciate, or is this something that they're just like, oh God, don't put a spotlight on me? Or, I mean, are they feeling like it is achieving whatever goal needs to be achieved, or are they feeling more isolated or more insecure? Or do they feel like it's actually helping people understand them more, or things about the same because of these curriculums?
I can maybe speak to that as a parent of a child who is not always fully represented in what she sees in her curriculum. This is helpful. This is helpful for my child to feel included and like she belongs, because she sees herself and she sees people she loves in the books in the library, in the curriculum that is being delivered to her. And also, it allows students to connect with one another in a meaningful way about their identities, which is something everybody struggles with in high school. How do I express my identity, and how do I find other people who won't malign me for my identity? And for us as a district to normalize and include all identities is a really critical piece of belonging and safety. It is really important to my child's safety to know that the adults around her affirm her identity.
But I guess my question though is that if it's just this 1 month, I mean, and I guess maybe I'm wrong here, but it's not just this 1 month. It should be across the board. So she wouldn't feel like, okay, this month I'm safe. I mean, hopefully it's all year, all summer, all next year, you know. And I guess what I'm just curious about is, you know, what exactly the curriculum is doing that. And please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that I don't appreciate the work or anything like that. I just am curious about whether or not it's.
So Josh, I can jump in and kind of maybe give some context. I think the first question that you asked and I wrote down is, have we gotten feedback from the community? And I guess to your point about othering, I would be very reluctant to survey that group of students, because I'm not surveying Black students to feel like they're being othered. I'm not surveying students with disabilities to see if they're being othered. I think your initial question early on was, how do we normalize what we're doing? And this is for the History Month as a result of the resolution, but these conversations organically happen all the time in our classrooms. And I think it goes beyond just instruction for students, but also the instruction that we provide to families and the community events to help our families better understand the journeys that their children are going through so that they can support. So if I had to say, I'm asking parents, and Amber, thank you for sharing your perspective. The last community conversation, well, 2 community conversations ago, the parents were very grateful. And we also had some students in attendance who were very grateful that the district actually was offering a session to help parents along. And I think the other piece for me is about application of the training, the professional development that our parents and then our students are getting. And I was able to observe firsthand one of our parents whose student identifies as LGBTQ within that group actually utilize some of the learning in another parent meeting. So for me, when I think about impact, it's replication of the practice that we're asking people to do and helping people to lean into those conversations and to be seen and heard as we talk about who we are as a district. So I don't plan on surveying them, but the data.
Oh no, that's okay. What I mean. I'm not saying that you should go around, and that's the last thing I want is for them to feel like, oh, you know, somebody wants to, you know, ask me these questions. But if somebody had come to a teacher or come to somebody and be like, hey, you know, I'm not really comfortable with, you know, all this focus because it makes it feel like there's something abnormal about it or whatever. Yeah, and I'm glad to hear that it is beneficial, because that's really, I mean, that's the whole point. It's like, we don't want to do things that don't benefit the kids. And if it is, it is. My only concern, like I've said, kind of ad nauseum, is this: I just don't want to create some sort of environment of otherness.
Well said. Josh, I just want to also point out, we are in the implementation, like baby steps, toe in of this work. We passed this resolution in March of 2023. It is still 2023 when we're recording this. And while we haven't made, tremendous gains, this is the first October since we've passed this resolution to do this work and to have these opportunities to celebrate. So I think we don't know yet is the best answer to your question. And I'm excited about the potential outcome for our communities and for our kids. All right, I want to move on to our next one. Dr. Jameson talked about our professional development. We started this year with an opportunity, and I took a little screenshot of my X or tweet or whatever it's called these days, whatever the kids call it. And we had every single one of our staff members together in a room. And we couldn't do it here on our MRH campus because it's really hard to get all of us together in a room to do that. So luckily, we have two amazing partners in our growth and development that we were able to be hosted at St. Louis University and led in our conversations by our diversity, equity, and inclusion team at the special school district, that we're able to have this conversation around equity, inclusion, and accessibility. And one of the things then related to accessibility is accessibility of content, accessibility of representation, accessibility of the opportunity to wrestle with a concept and idea. So we're very excited about this start of the journey, and we will see more along the way in the coming years. Continuing on in our look ahead of kind of progress that we've made is districts and schools shall incorporate our LGBTQ people in our school curriculum, including health and sexual education. We are in the process this year of working on not just one course, but all of our courses to identify what are our essential outcomes for this. And specifically where we see this often coming up, as we see this coming up, like we said earlier, in our health education. The last time our health education standards were updated was 2007. The world has changed dramatically since 2007. So recognizing that the standards that we'll be jumping from and learning towards need to be modernized. And that is part of the framework of what we'll be doing as we continue to work through this year. You've already seen this picture, but it works again in this context. Is LGBTQ issues in people. We talked about the elementary school identifying and celebrating contributions. We see representation at our middle school and our high school, and we continue to make sure that they are represented in a positive light in our school and throughout our learning environments. When we see in our resolution that we're going to make sure that our resources that our students use in our classroom are representative of those diverse perspectives, luckily, that is already written into our policy. Policy IIA is around instructional materials, challenges us to make sure that any resource that we adopt is multicultural, disability aware, and gender fair. So recognizing that before we do any new adoption of any new resources, it's already written into the policy that it has to be representative of those things. Now, we have not gone back in time since before all of us got here to look at what was adopted before, but we know that this is a policy that is used for all resources to make sure that there's adequate representation. And that is directly in our policy. So here's a question for you. This is the final section for this, and you've got two parts, and they lead one into the other. All right. So after you've kind of seen and experienced some of the progress we've made in the very short time since our LGBTQIA resolution was passed, a question for the board to wrestle with is how might this resolution increase our students' readiness to be leaders, scholars, stewards, and citizens who will thrive in a diverse and changing world?
Well, this actually is probably the easiest thing for me to understand within the context of this resolution, because I mean, I remember growing up and having a lot of these things be either taboo or just unacceptable, like, and the idea that for most of the kids at the school, it's just like, whatever, that's just life. And
Yep.
I love that. I love that it's no big deal to them, that it seems to me that it's the adults that have the problem. It's not the kids. The kids seem to be like, hey, people have civil rights. Hey, people deserve to live the life they want to live and be who they are. And I think that just going forward, continuing with that attitude checks all those boxes.
Yeah, and I'll add on to that, Josh, from the earlier discussion where you were mentioning more like singling out. I don't think it's singling out, it's leaning in, right? So having that month where we really bring it out is leaning in and letting students see it up front. And so that minority becomes the majority for a little bit, which really helps our students understand that the world is diverse.
Yeah, for me, I think it will, because we have students now who utilize their voice and speak up and out for others. I think as they get into adulthood, the awareness that they were taught in school is going to instill in them to become fighters and advocate and voice in their adulthood as they go through college or whatever the next step may be. We see it now going on in the world. Our young adults are stepping up. They're going against the grain. They're getting out, making change. And I think that's what I want for our students, regardless of what they thought going in, is how they feel and the awareness coming out of school to lead them in their adulthood to be those advocates for others.
And I believe part of this readiness is about being critical thinkers, is being able to investigate, to learn, to look into things that you may not know much about and may not understand, but you still look either for a guide or you look for information. Like, you look to be educated, you look to understand, to build bridges, to connect. That's the picture of an MRH grad.
I think too, just building confidence, being confident with who you are and finding your place, regardless of who you are, how you identify or what have you. But I think just being able to build that confidence to be proud of who you are. I guess I should keep going on with that, like being confident with who you are, because then I think, as you progress in life and you mature, that's a good skill to have confidence to be able to move forward in your career or with your family or what have you, is something that, is lacking in a lot of people, and it shows up later in life. So I think being able to build that confidence and comfortability in your own skin is a great thing.
Well said. Well said. And I'll finish and wrap up with this last question. Think about now where you sit, the role you play in our community and how we serve our community. What do you believe in your heart of hearts is that as a board member, through that governance and policy, and to support our staff and our students, where do you fit in this grand scheme of things?
I think, Dr. McGee, your presentation tonight illustrates the governance level questions that board members asked after we passed the resolution for what will it look like to implement this policy and what investments will the district make in carrying it out. So not for us to dictate how that might happen, but for us to ask the question at a governance level of what will this look like? Can you illustrate it for us? So I think this tonight is an example of the board having asked the right question after this resolution was passed to enable you all to move forward in your work.
And what policy do we need in order to support administration and staff to be able to fulfill their roles in this?
We've asked as well to see evidence of how this will be interwoven into staff training. And I think we've seen Dr. Ambers Phillips implementing that with the trainings and professional development that are being given to staff, be another avenue of implementation.
Beautiful. Thank you for the opportunity to share. And more importantly to me, thank you in March of 2023 for stepping up and advocating for so many amazing humans that I've met and got an opportunity to interact with in my life and to give them a voice and a platform. So thank you for your brave work and your volunteer service.
Okay, thank you so much for that presentation. We will move on to item 2.02, our Maria J. Langston building. I think it's our Maria J. Langston Administrative Center renovation bids with Dr. Dietrich and Chris. Mr. Holzer.
Chris works just fine. Good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Holzer. I'm CFO here for the Maplewood Richmond Heights School District. Introduce my colleague, Dr. Michael Dietrich.
Hello, everyone.
All right, this evening we do have some exciting information. We have a recommended contractor for the work at the new building. Excuse me while I stumble and bring up the presentation. There we go. So we did have a public opening. We are required to have a sealed bid or a closed bid for this project because it exceeds the $50,000 threshold dictated by policy and statute. So we had that public opening on November 17th at 10 a.m. We did have 3 contractors submit proposals, and they are here before you: Legacy Contracting Group, Crestline Construction Services, and A. Eilers Construction.
Yeah. So after receiving the bids, we did have contractor interviews. We had an opportunity to meet with the leaders and potential site superintendent for all 3. And on that committee included myself, Mr. Holzer, and also Ms. Erin Mueller from Corrigan Clark and Associates. And all submitting contractors attended at their allotted time slot.
We did evaluate each of the proposals that we received in conjunction with the data we collected throughout the interviews. And you can see those before you. I won't read them to you, but this is the weighting for each of those categories and criteria. You can see that we most heavily weighted the technical proposal and design because that is what makes the job look the way we expect it to look, is that technical proposal and design. We know that if those aren't what they need to be, we don't have a good product. So Dr. Dietrich and I will be ensuring over the course of this project that both of those things remain in alignment with our expectations.
Yeah. So as Mr. Holzer said, we had 3 contractors who bid on this. We had A. Eilers, Legacy, are the first 2. We came away very impressed with all 3, Crestline being the 3rd one. It was my first experience in really going through a matrix and scoring vendors and doing the interviews. And I came away with a very positive experience, knowing that we probably could have went with any of the 3. But in the end, Legacy was definitely the one that rose a little bit above the rest. And we were excited to recommend them to you.
So Legacy did come in with the lowest bid. We aren't required to select the lowest bid. We're required to select the lowest best bid. But in this case, and sometimes those two don't directly align, but in this case, Legacy did present both the lowest and the best bid in this case. And Mike and I will be meeting with Legacy, I believe it's Grant.
Grant.
Yeah, their representative tomorrow morning to really dig in and start the planning process for this renovation.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. I think one of the things that really stood out was the leadership that Legacy did bring to the table. Grant was one of the first ones on site. He asked great questions, and I think it'll be a really good partnership with them.
One of the things that we do consider is and hold near and dear is our relationships, not just with our faculty or staff, our students, our colleagues, but we also we put a lot of emphasis on relationships with our vendors, and in this case, the vendor being a contractor. So we have had conversations with each of the three, including the two that did not win this particular proposal, because we want to make sure that we see their names come into the pool again if we have other projects, because as Mike said, we would have been comfortable with any three of these doing this work. We have done work with Crestline. We have not done work with Legacy or A. Eilers, but they are the reputations precede them. So although we're selecting Legacy tonight, we expect, due to the communication that we've gone through between proposal and recommendation, that the relationships with these contractors is intact and we'll see them again.
Remind me where this cost is reflected in our budget for this year.
We have $875,000 is the budget that we are beginning with. That will include the design, build, and also the FF&E, which is furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So all of those things combined should get us right around to that $875,000 mark. These are the funds that we used. The funds used for this particular project are the funds we borrowed this past spring from the certificates of participation 2023. Sorry, it's been a long day, glitching out a little bit. But that's where these are. So we track those in a separate fund, much like we do the bond funds. We track them separately, and they are presented with the regular financial statements each month.
Chris, I had a question. So over our last construction project, it seemed like there was a lot of change orders, and I know that a lot of that can't be helped. Like, when you find a pipe where it shouldn't be a pipe and things like that. But are we building in some sort of cushion, based on our experience with the gym renovation into this new project?
We are, and let me stop my share here so I can grab that. I have both my screens going here, but I did not have that number in front of me. I believe that contingency amount is right around 10%, which on a project of this scope, I believe is appropriate. It's not a major renovation. Contingencies, obviously you can hold whatever percent in contingency as you want, but after talking with Mike and reviewing these proposals, felt like 10% was a contingency that we could live with. But of course, change orders are part of the natural course of a construction project, but we certainly hope that we don't see nearly as many on this one as we did the last one.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Given the total funding that we are drawing from the COPS, and that some of that is going to cover the larger construction project, how are we balancing out with this budget as it aligns with the expenses that we're making to cover the remainder of our construction project.
So I think what I hear you saying is how much will we have left to allocate to the remaining middle school, high school project? Is that
Maybe I'm asking, do we have enough left over to allocate to all of our expense need on the middle school, high school project?
we should? It's an unknown factor at this point, but the budget and the earmarks and the contingencies that we're holding, I believe will hold as we come down to the conclusion of this project, of the larger middle school, high school project. We're watching our budgets very closely. Let me put it that way. We are
Yes.
being extraordinarily scrutinizing. Perhaps
As are we.
all.
Those conversations are probably 2 to 3 hours a day between Chris and myself.
Thank you.
You guys share the timeline as well so that the board knows based on the bids today and with the approved recommendation, what the timeline looks like so that community can hear that as well.
Mike, you want to grab that one?
Yeah, so we'll know a lot more tomorrow with the discussions that we have with Grant. But the preliminary conversations from our is they want to get started as soon as possible. And completion with them, I believe, was 1st of May.
And that well positions us to move in furniture. And remember, we have 12 or 13 existing employees, plus the additional employees from cabinet that we're moving in. So this will allow us to move into this space with adequate time to make sure that we're getting everything and everyone's settling in okay. So our expectation is that we'll be able to spend that late spring and early summer getting ready, and then we'll get to talk about some of the more exciting things about what a grand opening and ribbon cutting looks like.
Yeah, and part of that too is making sure that we are aware of taking care of our operations team, because come end of May or mid-May, that is their busiest time, and they're already starting to look at the start of the next school year. So we want to get everybody into central office, get them settled, so our crews can then focus on the buildings and getting ready for kids in August.
You want to
and I'm sorry, I don't remember if we were told this. Is there a timeline for when y'all have to be out of the building you currently occupy?
We have 2 more years on that hitch. And so that's a topic that Dr. Jameson and I, and now bringing Dr. Dietrich in, need to spend time on what that looks like moving forward. Because not only is that our leased office space for our administrative team, district leadership, it's also the spaces where we park our buses. So we have engaged in, we've opened the dialogue with our property manager and thus the owner of the properties, and we will be able to present a plan for you on what that exit looks like in the coming months.
Thanks.
I do want to add the purpose of the new building is that we are given space back. And so when we think about esports and our board meetings and other meetings that we hold in that space, this will allow us to give that space back to our kids, our staff, even those individuals who are actually using spaces within the high school as offices. So I'm super excited for that. And also for the board to actually have a space where your items don't have to be brought to and from for meetings and actually can be stored, but it also gives us a space for professional development as well. So I am excited.
Not to drag this out, but I do want to mention, I want to honor the partnership with our city and our city leaders as well. Dr. Dietrich attended the design and review board meeting a few weeks ago and presented our exterior plans to them. And they are also excited, which is great because I mentioned partnerships and relationships. Both of those things with our city and our city leaders are critically important to us. And it's great to know that they are supporting us as we go through this transition.
And might this summer, have us see an end to all construction, not forever, but that we may be over this hump.
We were gonna ask the board to vote for a 5-year moratorium on all construction projects.
Please.
Yeah, I don't, 5 years might be a little long, but we do need to take a breath and pause and settle into our new spaces. And we're looking forward to not having to dodge large equipment on the way into work every morning. So it's a small moment in time, but it doesn't feel like that when you're going through it. So we acknowledge everybody's patience.
I do recall sitting in the public speaking final, hearing about presentations regarding a better MRH, and a lot of students are advocating for a new field. So 5 years may not be possible given all of our student needs.
We have lots of ideas, so now we just got to figure out how to turn them into realities.
If we have no more questions, we'll go ahead and move on to our action items.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Can I get a motion and a second to accept the bid package from Legacy Contracting Group?
Move to accept the bid from Legacy Contracting Group as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 3.02. Can I get a motion and a second to move us into executive session?
Move to
I moved to
enter.
Oh, go ahead. Go, Josh.
No, please. Fine. I move to enter executive session in accordance with section 610.021, subsection 3, 9, and 13, and section 610.022 of the revised statutes of Missouri on December 7th, 2023 for the following specific reasons: personnel matters.
Second.
Roll call vote?
Ms. Kaufman,
Yes.
Ms. Francois,
Yes.
Ms. Martinez,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson,
Yes.
Ms. Goldsman,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Ms. Withicum.
Yes. Meeting is adjourned at 7:44 p.m. The executive session link is in board docs, and I will see you all there momentarily. Thank you.